we have a great group of really experienced policy people who are here to enlighten us about what's happening in the rest of the country. So please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Trying to do, we have a similar group in Michigan called the Michigan Transportation Team, which was a continuation of a need study, of a transportation need study that was created by the legislature. The transportation team was created by the legislature to look at the needs. And we took the first step by talking to all of our local agencies, talking to the Department of Transportation, non-motorized groups, transit groups, and everybody submitted what they felt was the need in their individual groups. That's how we developed what we needed to take to the legislature to show how much additional revenue we were going to need. And at that time, back in 2005, the need was basically, we need to double the amount of the investment that we were already putting into the transportation fund, which was $2 billion. We needed another $2 billion. The legislature, under the Granholm administration and a Democrat House and a Republican Senate, decided that that wasn't really palatable. They wanted to talk about it some more. They wanted to procrastinate more. They wanted to continue kicking the can down the road. In the meantime, the Governor Granholm spent her 8 years not being able to convince the legislature that something needed to be done and needed to be done quickly. Governor Snyder came in. He has spent 4 years, his first term, trying to get the legislature to understand the need. In the meantime, the legislature asked that another study be done to look at how much real money we need. And again, the individual representatives that were spearheading this group came up with the same scenario. We need about $2 billion to make modest improvements and continue the services that the public needs and demands. What I have in front of you is a flow chart of how our $2 billion is distributed. And if you look at the top half, those are what we call off the tops, where we carve out specific programs and individual group for funding. And the symbols there, if you can read them, they kind of come back down to the bottom. Some of those carve-outs were intentional because back in 1997, Governor Hagler felt that he didn't want to continue giving any additional money for bus transit or transit services. So that was his way to carve out that last 4-cent increase and give it to the road agencies only. But the public transit system does get guaranteed revenue. They get 10%, up to 10%, of the Michigan Transportation Fund. The Michigan Transportation Fund is constitutionally protected, and it always has been. So the gas tax and the registration fees are protected. The legislature can maneuver to some extent. The money's inside the fund, but they can't deviate or take it out of the transportation purpose and put it into the general fund purposes. The past 5 years, the Department of Transportation has needed additional revenue because of their bond debt service that they're paying. The department has maxed out. They're at 25% of their state revenues that they generate. That's their limit. They're at a little over $2.2 billion is their debt service, is their amount that they owe back. So that being said, that causes the department to have a shortage of funds to match federal aid. And that's what can happen when you start talking about bonding. Not that I'm saying it's a bad deal, it's that you have to understand what is the impact when you bond. At some point in time, the bonds come to fruition and you have to start paying it back. And like anything, as time continues, the amount that the state had to pay back every year increased. And it was substantial to the point right now where MDOT is paying over $200 million in bond debt service. So that tells you how drastic the picture is for the department, that they needed general fund money so that they could match their federal aid. And the state has been gracious enough to appropriate between $20 and now $150 million a year to help the department match their federal aid. And at the very bottom, you can see the department, we get about $1 billion in federal aid, and MDOT gets 75% of it, and the balance, the 25%, goes to local agency projects. And that's regardless whether it's a city, or a county road project, it doesn't matter. We kind of figure how to divide that money up amongst ourselves. So our picture is pretty bleak, and it has been bleak for a long time. If you have ever traveled in Michigan, it is not a pretty picture at the local or the state level. The city of Detroit, their bridges literally have plywood underneath them to keep the concrete from falling down on the vehicles passing underneath them. Governor Snyder has taken this matter to task. I mean, he is being a wonderful leader. He's been a great leader in transportation funding and in transportation funding increases. The problem we had as a coalition, and I think we've got pretty much the same mix of groups that you have here in Minnesota, with the exception we have the Michigan Chamber of Commerce on our side. They wanted a tax increase, and that's not something you're going to see very often when you talk about the chamber. The state chamber said that they wanted a tax increase, a fuel tax increase, but we had different sides. Now with the House and the Senate both being led by Republicans, the Senate wanted to do a straight-up gas tax increase. The House wanted to do a ballot proposal to increase the sales tax for transportation funding. We would have preferred the straight-up gas tax increase, but that would have made us the highest fuel tax state in the nation. And by that I mean state tax, or federal fuel tax, state fuel tax, and sales tax. The sales tax does not go for transportation purposes. That goes directly into the general fund, and that helps fund schools, local government, and state government. That was the problem. We have a tax structure problem with that. So what the end conclusion was here, and this was way into the last lame duck session, the last night of session, they finally came to an agreement that they would increase, or excuse me, they would remove sales tax off of fuel and allow us to increase to that level and convert to a wholesale tax, but never get less than that amount of money. So that's a good thing for us. The problem is by taking that money out of the sales tax, or not allowing them to collect that revenue on sales tax for the general fund, it created a big hole, a $1.2 billion hole. And the way the legislature decided to deal with that is to have a ballot initiative that would be a 1% increase on sales tax. So we would go from 6% to 7% statewide. That was their solution, that was their agreement. But politics being politics, certain groups, the other side of the aisle, wanted some consideration. They wanted some flexibility for the city of Detroit to use some of their highway funds for transit services or transit issues. Up to 20% of their highway monies can be used for transit purposes. They also wanted to increase the low-wage income, earned income tax credit. That was at 6%. That was increased to 20%. That would help the low-income folks to adjust with the 1% sales tax increase. That was what the deal was. We were not supportive of that. We would have liked to see the straight gas tax increase, but this is what the legislature wanted. We tried and we tried to push it from the bottom up, but I can tell you what's important is that your leaders, your majority and minority leaders in both chambers and the governor work together to come up with a solution that they can all agree to. And there will be some haggling. I'm sure there will be, as was done in Michigan. There is some compromise, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, that's what the legislature offered, and that's what we were willing to accept. And this is what it's going to look like should it pass. The first column today is a 19-cent gas tax, 6% sales tax, not dedicated for transportation purposes, equals 39 cents a gallon. If we change it, if the ballot proposal passes, we will implement a 14.9% wholesale tax, eliminate the 19-cent gas tax and the 15-cent gas tax or diesel tax, and the average rate will be 42 cents a gallon. That's an additional $1.2 billion for roads. So now the new total is $2.2 billion that we will have for transportation purposes. We average, because the fuel prices have come down so much, we figure that technically, wherever you take that snapshot, it's going to be between a 3 and a 7 cent increase. Had we stayed at $4 a gallon, it would have been no increase. But because the prices have dropped, it's going to technically be a slight increase in tax at the pump. We don't collect the revenues at the pump. We collect it at the rack or at the wholesale dealership level. That way we can avoid, we were able to avoid lots and lots of fraud that was going on at the pump. So that saved us about $35 billion a year back in 1997 is when that was changed from the pump to the rack. And again, the sales tax would be increased to 7%, remove the sales tax on fuel, and the plus side on this is not only do we take care of the structural problem on fuel, where all the money goes for transportation purposes, that's tax on fuel and registration fees, but the 1% sales tax is going to generate additional revenue for schools. $300 million a year annually for schools and $100 million annually for local government. Those are townships, cities, and counties that are eligible for that money. And again, those two categories are constitutionally protected also, which is good for them. So it's a three-pronged plus side, but you're asking yourself, if you're just replacing it, how do you get more money for those two groups? They eliminated colleges or universities getting any of that 1% extra money. And that's what was the ticket, the big ticket item that the Democrats really felt comfortable with. Because we're going to generate more money for schools, because we're going to generate more money for local government, they got on board. And that's how we passed this very convoluted, very difficult package. The problem that we have as an organization and as a coalition is how do we sell that to the public? And that's what we're at right now. We're in the stage right now of developing a plan to sell this package to the public. Right now, we've had polling done, early polling, on this proposal. And we're between 38 and 40% of the public supports it. Without any education, I feel pretty good about that. But we also have the support of the governor leading this initiative. He has taken on this challenge even further. He is going to be the spearhead of this initiative, and he's providing his services. We've got the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader in the Senate, also speaking in favor of this and willing to advocate for it if we ask them to. So based on those three things, I think we're in a real good position to pass this ballot initiative that's going to help these three groups. And we're excited about that. We're a little nervous about it, obviously, but we feel that with a little bit of good education and good conversation out there by the three leaders, we should be able to pass this. Do we have opposition? Absolutely. We have the Tea Party, we have these non-tax groups that are out there. They're making noise, they're a strong group, but I think at the end of the day, we're going to be a little bit stronger. Thank you.